This tutorial is going to be about the secondary packaging for the Muay Thai Baiju product. I have a separate tutorial on building this bottle. It's very straightforward. It's just a revolved bottle and I mapped a label on it. But the reason I built that is because I want to build the secondary package for this. And I did it in two different, well, I did it in one way, but there are two executions on how to build that. I made a really nice version of it in E-flute, corrugated. And then I'm also suggesting another version in a case bound, which would be a much more high-end version of that. But the functionality is the same. I want to emphasize that functionality here. I figured out a way to articulate this box that doesn't have any mechanisms. So it works pretty well. So this is just part of the process. And this is also a big part of our class. I'm not just using the 3D program to build this. I am incorporating multiple skills, which I'm emphasizing in the class. There's a little bit of 3D building. There's going to be some mock-up creation and a foam core and some corrugated structures. And so it's a little bit of building and trying things and trying to figure stuff out and then going back to 3D to get some information from the file to get this to work. So it was actually kind of interesting. And the outcome I thought was really, it's just a basic box, but the way it articulates is pretty interesting. So it's going to be a two-piece box that splits down the center. So let's start with the with that part. So I have the bottle in here. So the idea is I was going to have, this is the front. The seam of this opening box will be right from the front, and it will open in its standing position. There are other boxes like this that we are on the market that function this way, but they are a little bit complicated, and there's multiple pieces. So I wanted to do a simple version of this kind of a hinged open box. So this is just half of it. The other half would be to the left-hand side. It would hinge down the center. And it would be, for corrugation, it would be all one piece with double end walls folded over, one-sided printing, because I'm going to bring the double end walls to the inside. And then for a case bound, it's however we want to do that. That's a kind of a handmade box, and we'd wrap beautiful art around it. And then I have a little space at the top for a filler to protect the bottle. The key to this is the design of the base. This makes this work. I have this block in here. I have a little clearance front to back, so I have some room for this articulation. But we have this kind of V cut here at the bottom. And that's where these outer boxes bottom out. They hinge on center and they pivot up into the middle of this. And with a little angled wedge glue block on the left and the right, it holds this open. So I'll show how all that works. So it's quite interesting. So this little base, let's just get rid of the bottle. So depending on how I'm doing it, in case bound, this would be made in a different way. In the corrugation, I have a die line that folds up with an EVA insert inside here that the bottle sits in. And that is all also done in the E-flute, so I can get 100% printing. So like I said, there's a couple of manufacturing approaches here, but the articulation and how the functionality of the box works is the same. All right, so with these parts in mind, so I just built a box, I built another box and just differenced it from that to represent that. So we can see this is for the corrugation. I have a thicker wall here on the front and the back. That's my double end wall. E-flute coming in, folding across and going back down again. And then I'm trapping a tab from the top and the bottom to get that. So that's why this wall is a little thicker than the other one. In case bound, it would be very, very similar. It gets slightly smaller front to the back because I don't have all this material in here. So that's just from the different manufacturing techniques. And I have other tutorials on how I'm building that stuff. So if we go to the front, here it is in wire. This is the geometry. So we have the outer box, and here is the tray. So let's select the tray. That's this piece in here. We don't want to move it. Edit, undo moving. The key is this little block here on the side. It's like a little wedge piece that I made. I'm anticipating maybe that would be an extrusion, something very simple to make, because we don't really see it. It's not very visual. It's just sort of buried down in the corner of the box here. But it's critical on the functionality of how this is going to work. So that little wedge, when it pivots through space on center, traps this base in the open and closed position. So right now, this represents the closed position. As you can see, it's filling up this space. And when these boxes are closed and held together, it's pinching against the base. The base cannot move side to side or front to back. And with the bottle in position trapped up at the top by the closure, the bottle cannot move up and down. So nothing can move. It's all kind of an interlock and it's trapped. But what's interesting is, how do I get these shapes to cooperate with one another in its open position? That's the key. So let's select the little wedge. And I'm going to select this outside box. There are two of them, but I'm just going to rotate one at a time to show this. So let's take this and we are going to rotate this. The rotation point is right down here. This is the pivot area for the two sections of the outer box, which are actually one part. So I'm going to select that. And what we're going to do is we're going to rotate this in a negative direction at 30 degrees. I'm just going to do negative 30. So now we have rotated that out. And again, this will happen both left and right. So keep that in mind. So while that does that, we can see our little center block now is floating in space. But it wouldn't do that. It would fall to the bottom as these parts articulate. So I'm going to move this down to represent the action that happens all at the same time as the outer boxes are pivoted. So this moves down while that outer piece, I'm not ortho snapped, hold on, moves down and it bottoms out on this angle on the bottom of these two boxes. So that moves down at the same time as these boxes are moving out. Now, down is all relative. Down compared to the outer point, but up compared to the center. So it's basically kind of sitting stagnant in the middle. I know I have a little extra space here. I didn't do this line to line because if I build this out of corrugation, there's going to be a little puffiness going on, a little bit of folding and a little extra space. So I'm just sort of allowing for that, because I did discover that this articulation doesn't need to be line to line accuracy. It's not like a machine part. There's a little bit of flexibility there, which is kind of nice. So it doesn't have to be as perfect. But that little extrusion, or this little wedge shape mounted inside of this outer box, pivoting from this location, allows this base to basically just float from the up position to the down position without any mechanisms, because the bottle is also sitting in here and the weight of the bottle is helping to keep that in position. So even when you take out the bottle, these three parts articulate in this action perfectly. So it is quite interesting. So it took time to keep this simple, because this is extremely simple. It's about the shapes working together, not adding a bunch of screws and other layers and a lot of this articulation. So I just wanted to share that because I thought it was quite interesting how this works. And it's adaptable to a more economical kind of box that are corrugation, and it works really well at the very high end. Same mechanism. So that's how this works. I was going to continue with defining how I did this. Let's just put this into perspective view so we can see how that part is traveling outside. I don't have the wedge shape done in full 3D. I just have it from the front view, but it functions the same way. And then the bottle would just sit straight up. I am going to have some inserts at the top here that trap the closure of the bottle, that keep the bottle centered. I have quite a generous amount of space around the bottle, as you can see from the platform. So if it ever were to get hit or pushed or anything like that, it wouldn't be affected. So it's quite nicely secured with a beautiful unboxing articulation. So even some of these structures, I'm anticipating, it's like a showpiece. You would keep the bottle, the consumer would keep the bottle in this, or even in a commercial establishment, you would have this beautiful kind of presentation. So if we take that a step further and make some renderings of this, I'm going to show mapping in some art. Let's see here, box closed art. Let's get rid of this. And let's get rid of actually, let's undo because I don't want those parts to be in that moved position. So I'm moving that back up, and I'm going to undo the pivot. And then we'll go to box closed art, and we'll have that. So here's the box in its closed position. It's basically just a straightforward box, but it's got the seam up the middle, and it pivots open left to right. So for me, I really like the white of the brand. I'm not the brand expert. I'm just sort of looking at this bottle. I think the bottle to me as a Westerner is very interesting. For high-end spirits, this whole white opaque kind of glass bottle is a little unique. We have it on some other brand like Malibu rum and things like that. Usually in a high-end spirit, we have clear glass for the whiskeys and rums and gin and things like that. So to me, the brand is interesting because I'm not from China, but I find it kind of fascinating. So just me interpreting this, I think some of these details are interesting. I might not be correct, but I just sort of like how this works. So I kept this kind of this edge detail, right? I liked the white, inside and out. And I'm just thinking of having these kind of graphic components with the red in it. So like I said, this might be a package that is in someone's home or it is a brand establishment. So I didn't want to add a lot of flashy branding and graphics and a lot of things like that. I just wanted some kind of a beautiful imagery on the outside of this that suggests the brand, but looks very nice and not so flashy or overdone in some of these kind of environments. So we look at this from the front view. And let's go back to rendered, because I am going to bring in some art. We can only see the art when we bring it in. So here is the center of the box, and I have these two red panels, and I did bring it in from the edge. The original box for the Muay Thai Baijiu brand has these kind of corner reveals, but they do it in gold. It's like a gold box with their art in the center. So I wanted to I wanted to bring in the white. I thought that was kind of interesting. I love the white bottle. And the gold I see more as a subtle accent that maybe could be added. And the angle, doing all my research, the angle of the graphics on the label seems to be significantly important to the brand for a long time. So I found a piece of art which I thought was interesting. So I was going to bring in some of that art. So I'm going to click on this panel right here. You can see the purple. That's my witness lines just for this little panel, not for the whole box, but just that little panel. So if I go into my properties here and I click on this green part and go to add, I have some art prepared. I actually just found a piece of art which I thought was kind of interesting. I adjusted the color and made it into a deeper red. And I kind of adjusted the angle a little bit so I could get this to work. I think I have it in here. Oh, here are the pieces. Okay, so I had this angle art. I think the one I selected was this. So I'm just going to bring this piece of art in. This is very easy. It's planar. It's front. I'm just mapping it right on the front of that little panel. And I'm just going to say, okay. So what I have to do now is just tell it where I want that art to go. So I'm going to come up here and I'm going to snap into this top corner. And I'm going to come down and snap down into this bottom corner. Right about here. And now I just brought in that piece of art there on that side. So it's sort of a deeper red, not so much of a cherry red. It's sort of a deep, dark, got a little bit of black in it. And this particular art had this kind of linear angled pattern. So I just moved it around and lined it up with the angle pattern on the bottle. So I thought it was kind of nice. It's got the deep red, layers of red. It's got the angled kind of black lines that come from the label, but it's not overt. It doesn't have a lot of the copy and textural over it. It's just a suggestion of the brand. So I kind of like that. I thought that was interesting. So I'm just going to look at this, go back to the front. So I have two pieces of art here. So I'm going to select this one here on the left, and I think I oriented them or adjusted them so the art would line up. I think, if I remember correctly, this is the one on the left. Again, planar, say okay. I'm going to select this top corner. It's going to snap. I have my snapping on, so here comes the art. And I'm going to snap down here. So I actually spaced the two, are accounting for the white area in the center, so I could get these angled pieces to line up. It's not bad. It's a little off, but it looks pretty good. So I think that's kind of nice. That has a very the Muay Thai Baju brand feeling without being too over. And I love the deeper red, which actually comes from their red. The red is pretty deep. It's not so, this red I have over here is a little too bright, a little too light. It's not very interesting looking. So those are the two front panels, and that would just be imitated on the back here. So let's go to the side panel. Excuse me. So let's look at that from the right. I think I have a piece of art set up for that. We definitely have to go back into rendered. And I select that. And I'm under this little, under the properties, I have this little green square selected, plus sign. And I have a bigger piece of art right here. It's actually probably the same panel, just not cut up. I didn't create the art. I'm just using something that I found that I thought would work really well. So again, I'm going to snap to the top corner and come all the way down here. If that is the same piece, interesting. And so I loved that motif. Let's go perspective. Yeah, so there it is. So actually the front of the package is the two smaller panels, but it's perfectly square, which was part of my goal. It's not imperative, but I just like the idea that it's square. Because in the corrugated version of this, what I'm suggesting is I'm going to put in a SBS sleeve over this to protect everything, because it is quite nice, but it is a corrugated box. So that's what's strange about using corrugation and folding it up and making a relatively expensive box and then covering it, but then using that for DTC, direct to consumers. You would order this and get this in the mail, and it would be a very beautiful box. So you could remove the sleeve, which protects it in the mail, and you'd have this nice kind of display box that you could put the product in. And then for the high-end version, the sleeve wouldn't be necessary because it would be case bound and it would have some maybe beautiful printing, maybe not this, but maybe some other kind of illustrative printing on it that would work really well. It wouldn't necessarily need the sleeve because a case bound would probably go into another corrugated shipper if it was DTC. But if you bought it at retail, you would just take home the case bound box. So I'm looking at two different price points, two different scenarios with the same geometry. So once this is all done, we could see, I don't have, let me just make sure I have the bottle off. I don't want to bring that over again. Box closed art. Going to get rid of that. So now I have the art mapped. I don't have it on the back or the other side, but I think that could be okay. Now I just want to show how to move this. So I'm going to take this. So I have this under box art closed. I want to have, box closed art. I want to have, put this on another layer where I have box open art. So I'm going to select that layer, which has nothing on it at this point. And I'm going to go up to my little hammer here, and I'm going to change. I usually do change object layer and I move it, but now I see, copy objects to layer. Very convenient. So all I have to do is click that. And I now have moved all of this to this other layer, which is box open art. And so I'm going to move this open. So let's double check that I did this correctly. So I have box closed art. I will remove that. This is here, but I'm going to go back and make sure that I didn't move it and take it away because I like to leave it. I want to do renderings of this closed, which I have. So I have box closed art. And now I have moved a copy of that to box open art. So I'm going to deselect that, and here it is. So we're good. So now it's going to go to the front view. And we could, I like working, seeing my parts. So I'm going to turn off rendering here, and I'm probably just going to go to wireframe so I can see what's going on. So here's all this stuff. So what I can do is do these independently. I'm going to select this one and I want to rotate that to the negative position. So I'm going to go up to my rotate tool. I'm going to select that center and I'm going to do negative 30 degrees. I did play with this. I tried 45 degrees. I tried several different things. The 30 degrees seemed to work pretty well. I have this little cylinder up here, so I'm going to just get rid of that. It's going to get in the way. So I'll just delete that. I did build the little block up here with the indent, and I'll show you how that works. Actually, should have mirrored that over. Let's do that. Hold on. Edit. Do. Edit. Do. There's a little filler block on the top here that holds the bottle. So I'm going to, let's just mirror that over. Here's my mirror tool. It's gonna, actually, I need to mirror a copy. Copy, yes, I got a copy on. Okay. That's the little filler block that's gonna have the magnets in it. So let's get rid of that piece. And now since I have the art on here, I can articulate everything over. I didn't really fully detail this little wedge. That's just a 2D surface at that point. That was just to check my geometry. We don't really see that. That's not part of an aesthetic. It's just a functional part. So I'm not really going to deal with that much right now. We don't need to work on that. So let's go to rotate. I'm going to rotate right down here where I have my pivot point. I probably move these off center so we can see the lines, but that's not going to get affected that much. So negative 3, 0. Enter. Let's just back this up. And then we're going to take the other side and I'm going to rotate that. And I'll pick this same point at the bottom here, and that'll be positive 30 degrees. So now we can start to take a look at this perspective. So there are the two parts. They're hinging at the bottom. And again, can be made out of corrugated or case bound. So that's quite nice. And I love the angle. See here, I don't have the angled art, but if I do my rendering from this point of view, it'll show how all that works. So that's the outer boxes. And all I have to do is bring in the base. Now the base is up in the air. So let's grab that and go to our front view. And I'm going to move that down. I really love how these boxes work together. And it's just their shape, it's their contours that make things work. I didn't have to add pivot points or other materials or hold up strings or ribbons or any of that kind of stuff. It's just kind of works. So I really like that. So let's just bring in the bottle. Okay, the bottle's up in the air. Wonder if I should move everything up. That's to make a decision here. I'm going to leave the bottle. So let's just select everything else. I can't do that. Or I can, hold on. Let's select. Don't want that. I'm trying to select just below that red edge. And I believe if I use a center lock, I can deselect the bottle, which I did. So what I'm going to do is move all of this stuff. I'm an ortho. I'm just going to move this up and get the bottle into the base. So that'll be, so here we can see how this works. Love this. So these little wedge pieces, as this hinge is open, they pinch and squeeze on the base. So it squeezes the base in both locations because the pivot point is down here. So it really works. So I've made this now a couple of times and it works pretty well. So if we go into perspective, here's our look. Like I had mentioned, the label is not perfect, but it looks pretty good. So we could go into render mode with this. A lot of these images, since I'm not necessarily going for absolute photorealism, I'm trying to use 3D as a design tool and not just to create pretty pictures. Because these look really good. I could execute, I could send these out just even screenshots and export some of these, or I could go into rendering mode, or I could bring this geometry into KeyShot or something like that if you wanted to make the renderings even better. But since I'm using this kind of mock label, it's really not that critical. So I thought that turned out really quite nice, and that's just how I built this. So again, it's a combination of the 3D information and the 3D data informing how I might make things, and then making them and trying them to see how they work, and then learning, going back to the 3D file, going back and forth. So it's gotten to the point where I have fully articulating mock-ups that work really, really well. And I have a 3D file, and I have a die line, which I'm going to talk about in another tutorial that I created to make this outer box and then make the inner insert.